I think that signing has paid off multiple years down the road, not just the 2 years that the Bruins initially signed Howla for.
Hall is a perfect one. I think if Krejci didn't exist, or Krejci was Krejci didn't exist, that would not be good.
The Bruins would be in trouble.
Yeah, Bruins would have. I don't know if you have the 2011 Cup, but if Krejci didn't sign that deal and never came back, Halla would have been mine. I think Halla was a phenomenal choice there.
Bruins Beat is brought to you by the Game Time app.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat on CLNS Media, presented by Prize Picks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get up to $100 cash back on that first deposit. And we're presented by Game Time. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $20 off that first purchase. Terms apply. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That is a honeymooning Conor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
I don't know, Evan. It looks like I'm still in my office, but yes, as this is dropping, I am somewhere traversing the globe, but I'm happy to be here right now with you talking Bruins, Evan. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So we have done some of these ahead of time because these are evergreen topics that you can debate with us. You can, I will be around if you want to come at me about some of these. And I figure these are fun to do. It's the summer. We can't, there's not a ton of new things, so this is the perfect time. You picked a great time. You should have done your honeymoon in like November. That would have been a really smart move,
that'd be fun.
Like right at the beginning of the year. That'd just be a brilliant idea. But in this episode, we're going to do the best Don Sweeney free agent signing. So Don Sweeney took over in 2015. 2015 was his first crack at free agency. 2024 was it 9 or 10? Is that 9 or 10 free agency? I think it's 10. Because you have the 2020 in there. So 10 free agencies now for Don Sweeney. So we're going to take a look back at the best. And how we're going to do it is we're going to do a draft. We're going to draft the best free agents signings that he has had in his tenure as GM. It's going to be a snake draft. So we'll start with you, Connor, because you are freshly married. And we will do, you'll pick one, I'll pick one, then I'll pick one, then you pick one, and then you pick one, and then I pick one. We'll do 3 each.
Okay.
Hash them out, talk about them, reminisce, and then we'll do some honorable mentions at the end, maybe ones we forgot. So yeah, let's dive right into it. What would you, where do you want to start? Who would be your first pick?
I mean, I'm going to go with a guy that, again, they gave him a pretty solid paycheck, a well-deserved, I think, raise from when they first signed him. But in terms of what the return was, they get to be very pleased with it. I'm going to go with Linus Ullmark, 4 years. $20 million. This is a guy that, again, when Bruins signed him, people that offseason were like, what the hell? And you look at that offseason, right, where they had a lot of cap space, spent it on a couple of guys that really didn't necessarily move the needle. I think you had to give props to the Bruins and their pro scouting staff and Bob Asenzo, obviously, of identifying a guy in Ullmark who put together some really good underlying numbers on some pretty dreadful Buffalo teams. And not all the time were his baseline stats indicative of that. But I think they saw a guy that, had a lot more to give in a different role in a different environment, and a bit of a tougher defensive structure in front of him. And, the results spoke for themselves, right, in terms of what he provided his team. Wins of Vezina, was part of the best goalie tandem in the league. And I think especially, I'm sure that down the road, if Jeremy Swayman continues to develop into a franchise goalie, I'm sure he'll give a whole lot of credit to a guy like Ullmark of, I think it's always tough for any young player in the NHL to kind of carve out their role. But I think it's especially isolating if it's a goalie where you don't, it's not like it's a forward or defenseman where you got other guys you can lean on that know your same craft. It's like you got goalie Bob, you got like a few of the other kind of coaches, and you got your other goalie up in the NHL ranks. And I think for Swayman to have a guy in Ullmark who is, really supportive of him, really helped him out along the way, helped him develop, and just kind of had that extended runway, Swayman, of being able to develop with this guy who was able to take those reps as well. I think that played an instrumental part in kind of getting Swayman to where he is now, which is hopefully a franchise fixture for the Bruins moving forward. So I think you look at Ullmark's baseline numbers, his impact there, but also just how he, I think, impacted a guy like Swayman who has asserted himself as the next guy up for the Bruins. I think that's a home run signing for what Don Sweeney did in 2021 with Ullmark.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I think the reaction to it was kind of like, oh, that's an interesting signing. And, the future of Rask was very much up in the air. That was the same year that he had surgery and didn't really sign until like January, and then came back for like 2 weeks and then was, Bruins ambassador chugging Bud Lights in the in the luxury suites, which, like, in fairness, like, go off, dude. Like, that is a hell of a job. But I agree. I mean, Olmark, you think back, I mean, he scored a goal. Really, I think if you're going out and acquiring a goalie, which a lot of teams did this offseason, that's the blueprint for how you hope it goes, where it's like solid first season, outstanding second season where it's clear he fits in. He's a part of this team's DNA. And then he was great last year too. Swayman just, emerged a teeny bit more. And, the one thing, that hangs over Olmark was the playoff appearances were never terrific. You think about that 2023 playoff series against Florida. But for, $5 million a year for that, for a Vezina, like, in an age when goalies are making more than they ever have, and they're, they can take up a lot of a team's cap, Olmark gave you a lot. And it feels like he was here more than 3 years. Like, I feel like he fit in. He was a fan favorite. He had the goalie hug. We obviously wish him the best in Ottawa. Like, to me, like, that was a home run signing. And, he fit like a glove here. And I always love with those Sabres teams of like the late 2010s, even mid 2010s, like, with the Panthers winning. It's like, look at how many guys on this roster went on to be like legitimate cup winners, like contributors for those cup teams. Yeah. They just, it's like that meme where the guy's digging and he gives up, like, right away. When he hits it, it turns away. So I get the Olmark thing. So people obviously remember this because it happened less than a month ago. The Bruins went out at pick 25 and drafted a project and Dean Latorno. They took a big swing on their first round pick. They're projecting. It's not a sure bet. It's far from a sure bet. And that's what I'm going to do with my first overall pick, or my first round pick. And I'm going to go with Elias Lindholm. From this year. I have other value picks, but I'm going to expect those are going to be around in the second and third rounds in this draft. I think what Lindholm could give you is big. Number one center, fits your identity, defensive, great on draws, hopefully unlocks more offense from David Pastrnak, is definitely going to unlock more offense from the number one center position, slots everybody down so people are kind of more in where they're supposed to be. And if he hits, right, like if they do start scoring more, they're much better on the back end now. They're better up front now. They're, bigger in the bottom six. If he hits, and we talked about this on the last episode, like, is it crazy to think the Bruins win a cup in the next 2 to 3 years? Like, I'm going way far ahead of things, but like if he hits, if he really pans out and there's value there, and he is a legit number one center and it just works, the East is open. And if Elias Lindholm can help deliver you a cup in the next 2 to 3 years, because that's what we're projecting his prime of this deal is going to be, the next 2 to 3 years, that's a big thing. That's a really big thing. So again, lofty, big expectations with this, me picking Elias Lindholm where I am. But to me, like, what he could end up being, it's also the most expensive free agent signing of Don Sweeney's tenure. So there's a lot riding on this, 7.75 per. But I don't know. I think there's a real chance that, and I'm banking on this with my pick here, that he brings them to or very close to a cup. And that would be massive, obviously, but it'd be big for like Brad Marchand's career, to have 2 Stanley Cups, and Charlie McAvoy and Pastrnak would have their first. And I'm not saying Lindholm's going to be the sole reason, but he is a guy that performs in the playoffs, and he is a guy that works for that time of year. So I pick him with my first pick.
Yeah, I think for Lindholm, the most important thing is just about setting the proper expectations. Like, is he the 40-goal, 82-point guy he was in Calgary? I don't think so. But, like, he's more than what he showed last year where in Vancouver. And I think Zadar even mentioned this on Monday, where, like, he goes to Vancouver and really wasn't put in the right role for him to succeed. Like, played on the wing, played at some points down at the third-line center because you had Pettersson and JT Miller in front of him. Again, 2 really good players. But, like, the whole Vancouver decision to get a guy like Elias Lindholm instead of waiting for like Gensel to be available, it really didn't make all that much sense. So I'm not really basing like his numbers last year, which obviously were a dip, off of what I think should be the expectation. I think if you get 60, 65 points from the guy and you look at how good he is defensively, how much he impacts the game, I think you've got a really good player if he's able to do that. And I think you look at just how he makes everyone else around him better. Like, you look at how much teams the last couple of years have been able to key in just on David Pastrnak, whether it's at 5-on-5 play or on the power play. Now you have a guy, Lindholm, who can finish, down low. He hangs around grade A ice. He's really good in the playoffs because I think you see a lot of his plays, even with Vancouver. He hounds the puck in grade A ice, creates turnovers, does a lot of these little things that can go a long way. And if you give him a spot on the bumper on the power play, if you put him with David Pastrnak, you should have, there should be room to grow there. And again, can he be an 85-point guy? Can he take this huge step forward? I think it's probably asking too much, but can he be 65 points? It's pretty good for what you're getting in terms of a legit two-way player. So, again, I think you operate with some risk, as is the case with every big free agent signing, especially a guy who had a down year. But I just think you look at what's working in his favor, the supporting cast around him, and his own individual skill set. I think him getting back to what we expect of a 60-point guy should be the norm here, I think, with the Bruins moving forward for at least the next couple of years. And again, ask me about 4 or 5 years down the road later on. Because if he's your 3C, a couple of years when the cap jumps up to what it should be, third-line center is going to be making 7.5. So,
yeah. And also, you have to consider, I agree, I think, years 5, 6, 7 of that deal might not be everybody's favorite. If, deciding where the cap jumps. But, if they win a cup in the next 3 years, that ain't gonna matter. That ain't gonna matter because all right, well, we got our cup. So again, I'm drafting him, banking on a Stanley Cup, Connor. I got high expectations for this guy. I do. So with my second pick, I don't know if people have forgotten about this. I hope they haven't. And I think once I mention it, they won't. 2018, Yaroslav Halak, 2 years, $5.5 million over both years. At the time, they needed a competent backup for Rask. This was when goaltenders really started to play less, keep them fresh for the postseason. And that's what Halak allowed them to do. First year, they go to the Cup. Second year, they won the President's Trophy. He was phenomenal. I remember at that 2019 Winter Classic, there were legitimate talks that he would start that game. He was playing that good. He had some really good years here. Was very valuable to what they were trying to do with Rask. Got bumped by Swayman during that shortened 2020 season with COVID and everything. But, for 18-19 and 19-20, Halak was really strong for you. Now, he did come in that bubble playoffs. And didn't he win that first game against Tampa and then they lost 4 straight?
He did.
But again, at that time, not many backups in the league could come in and even get a win. And it was a weird time. So, there's a lot of things that went into that. There was Rask leaving the bubble, which is a whole nother topic that we talked a lot about at the time. But I'd go with Halak as my 2 pick. I think that was a really just a good free agent signing. Wasn't flashy or sexy, but I think he ended up giving you a lot more than what his AAV ended up becoming.
Yeah, I think there's just a forward-thinking move from Sweeney, his staff, and I'm sure Bob Essenza in terms of, I think at that point you look at Rask's age, and he's a guy that you saw for years, right, where you would turn to and give him 60-plus stats. I think at some point Essenza and these guys probably unless you have a Vasilevsky or someone like that who in today's age can continue to take on that workload, you got to find ways to carve things out and make things just a little bit easier for your number one goalies. So signing a guy in Halak who probably could have started for a couple of other teams, on the free agent market, giving him that contract and really cutting into Rask's workload. I think you saw especially play out in 2018-19 where you could make the case that Halak was the better goalie for the first half, but I think having that workload and having it ease up for Rask, you saw what he did in the playoffs, right? He looked so much more rested. And how many times did we see Rask at the end of some of these long seasons get to April and just run out of gas, running on fumes? I think, making that decision to sign maybe instead of going for the standard, choose your pick kind of veteran stopgap or journeyman kind of backup goalie, investing a little bit more money. Again, it wasn't a huge contract by any means, but investing a little bit more in a guy that can be your kind of 1B as opposed to just your straight backup. I think you saw how it worked for Rask and Halak, but it's been a strategy the Bruins have had for a couple of years now, and the results have kind of, spoken for themselves in terms of just how consistent the Bruins have been between the pipes the last couple of years.
And if memory serves, they were one of the first tandems, and again, they weren't doing the goalie hug and they weren't splitting the season 50-50, but They sort of helped usher in this era of, hey, we're going to have two legitimate goalies. We're not just going to ride one starter for 65 games. We're going to have two guys go, and it ended up working out. They went to the Cup, and they were great in that 1920 season. What would be your second pick?
I'm going to go with a signing from 2016. And I think Don Sweeney and the Bruins have had a pretty good run when it comes to identifying bottom six, especially fourth line kind of glue guys who can give a lot more in terms of being put in kind of a featured role. You go down the list of the Wagners, the Schallers, some of these other players that have had more to give. I'm going to go with old friend Riley Nash, who played for the Bruins played there for 2 years. I think made $900K both seasons. Was really solid his first year. Just a standard, fourth line role player. Had 17 points in 81 games. Second season, 17-18, 41 points in 76 games. At one point, I think he replaced Bergeron when he was hurt. So it was the feared line of Marchand, Riley Nash, and Dave Pastrnak. And he was pretty damn productive. And I think you look at what else he provided. He was pretty good on faceoffs, if I recall correctly. Just seems to do a little bit of everything, PK work, all that stuff that for a guy making under $1 million, what he provided, I think is exactly what you're looking for. If you're going to scour the free agent market for bottom six guys, finding guys like Nash who, can do a solid job for what's asked of them, but when put in featured roles can run with it and get 40 points out of a $900K player, I think that was a home run signing. I think we stand Riley Nash on this podcast because that guy was an awesome player for a couple of years.
We always have. He was great. I mean, I agree with you. Like the way he fit in, was kind of a bottom, definite bottom six guy. That year they went to play the Senators in the first round, and then the next year just kind of was more used to the city, and it worked out. And I think if you can get those guys, you take that every time. And you're right. I think I listed. We have a doc we're looking at right now of like all the best free agent signings. A lot of these are just bottom six guys. And I think when you're utilizing free agency correctly, it's getting those guys. Those are the guys you get in free agency. I mean, we've heard Barry Trotz tell his draft staff, his scouting staff, go take swings on guys. I can go out and find a bottom six guy in free agency. I can get those guys. I can't always get those high-end talents. And Nash is a perfect example of a guy that teams would kill for in free agency, especially making $900K per. I want to get to our third picks, but first, quick word from our friends over at Game Time. It's the summer, which means nothing beats a ball game. The crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd, and the nice weather. It's both relaxing and exciting, the perfect combination. Life is good. Have those experiences with Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. The Red Sox are actually good, which makes it even more fun to be at Fenway this summer, but maybe you're planning a trip around going to an opposing ballpark, which is actually one of my bucket list items, hitting every MLB ballpark in the country. Thankfully, I have Game Time to help that happen. Some of the things I love about Game Time are last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. There's flash deals, save even more, with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. And I like the zone deals. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So your third pick, who are you taking with your third and final selection?
I mean, I think you could go with a whole bunch of different players that deserve it, especially from this past year and their free agent signings. I'm going to go with Danton Heinen, a guy who made $775K, was a guy on a professional tryout contract, had to wait pretty much for the Bruins to find the loose change and the dollar bills under the mattress to get the money right to sign him. So we had to wait, I think, 2 weeks into the regular season for them to actually give him that contract. And you look at what he provided this past year, almost hit Almost hit 40 points, had 17 goals, I believe, was as advertised in terms of just his versatility. He could play up and down the lineup, was great on the PK, still a little bit of everything. So I think you look at, listen, you could pick multiple guys from this past year. I think last year, free agency wise, it's almost like Sweeney, I think he had a really strong offseason this year in terms of just being like, we need these two guys, we're getting them, as opposed to like, we swung and missed. We'll allocate our money and getting a lot of like guys that maybe don't necessarily move the needle. They got two guys in Lindholm and Zadorov, and I think that's great. But last year, where they were so constrained by the cap and they knew they had to kind of moneyball it to get through it, and they were able to find so many players, you could go with multiple guys they signed last year. But I'm going to go with Heinen, who I think when you look at just what the pay was for a player like that, how much he impacts the game, and just the baseline production, like 17 goals. I don't think anyone had that on their predictions last year.
Yeah, I agree with you. Heinen's a great pick. Fits anywhere in the lineup. Hell of a resurgence, too. I mean, a guy who, was sort of written off, didn't really fit anywhere else, comes back here, kind of the JV kid hanging around the varsity, hoping to get the call up. He does, and that hat-trick game against Montreal in December was like stuff you tell your grandkids about. So Heinen, for what he made last year, is certainly one of them. I'm going to go with someone, I don't know if people are expecting this, and I consider this free agency because he was not on the team the year before. I'm going to go 2022 David Krejci, 1 year, $1 million. Think about how big that was at the time. People wondering, was he going to come back? They fired Bruce Cassidy, in comes Jim Montgomery. Bergeron comes back, and then everyone's like, all right, like, Krejci coming back? Does he want to play here again? He did, and he performed. Second line center, 16 goals, 56 points. In 70 games, had 4 points in 4 playoff games. He was out for those first 3, came back for the 4 losses, but still put up points. Like, I just think what he brought you, how special it was that in that, all-time season for the Bruins, they had Bergeron and Krejci. It was the last year of those two together. He also, and we said this, we must have said this phrase 100 times in and around that time, he helped them kick the can down the road in terms of figuring out what they were going to do at center. And Krejci, to me, was the perfect guy you needed for that. He fit in well with Pasternak, fit in well with Zacha on the left, fit in well at times with Taylor Hall. So to me, like, that signing, it's weird because he was there before. He'd never played with another team before, but coming over from the Czech, I got to go with David Krejci on that spot. I think he was just fantastic. Anyways, honorable mentions. Some guys that we almost picked. I'm curious, one or two that you were jonesing to pick.
So mine's a little bit off the board a little bit, but I'm going to go with Erik Haula for 2 years, 4.75. I think, one, because of the expectations of what you had, the kind of tough hand the Bruins were dealt that year, and also just in terms of the asset management. I think it's also why the Ullmark signing, as much as I think people probably aren't happy about Korpisalo, right? People wanted Chychrun, they wanted Shane Pinto, all things considered. If you sign this guy with no risk and you're able to get a potential franchise guy or even just a useful player and Dean Letourneau down the road, and we'll see what Mark Kaslick does this year, you take it, right? Like you're getting added assets on top of a guy you just had to sign, right? So I think that's something that's useful. And I think you look at Erik Haula for what his contract was, 2 years, $4.75 million. You don't have David Krejci. You had a huge vacancy down the middle. Guys like Poitras and everyone were way down weren't even in the equation. Like, you had nothing coming up. To sign a guy like Haula, who I think had 44 points that year, was solid in terms of what the role was, like, for kind of what was a bridge-ish kind of year for what the Bruins had. Haula, I think, did an admirable job there down the middle for 1 year, and then you flip him for Pavel Zacha, who has I think much higher upside, and is now kind of carved out a role as kind of a piece of this next generation of Bruins talent. So I think in terms of just the initial signing, bridging the gap with a solid player, and then making the most of his presence with another year on his deal and flipping him for Zacha, I think that signing has paid off multiple years down the road, not just the 2 years that the Bruins initially signed Haula for.
Hall is a perfect one. I think if Krejci didn't exist, or Krejci didn't exist, that would not be good.
The Bruins would be in trouble.
Yeah, Bruins would have. I don't know if you have the 2011 Cup, but if Krejci didn't sign that deal and never came back, Haula would have been mine. I think Haula was a phenomenal choice there. I would want to go 2018 Sean Corrali. 3 years, 3.825 million over over those 3 years. Just sort of what he gave you. He didn't come over in that San Jose trade, did he?
He did.
He did. Okay. So did they? Wait a minute. Did they sign him off an RFA deal? Was that how that came to be?
I think that's how it was. Yeah.
Okay, so then maybe Corrali. I didn't include those guys, so I'm gonna pretend I didn't say. Sean Corrali was a great signing for that price. Gave you a lot. Actually, I take that back. Corrali, I'd forgotten that Corrali was here.
I believe he was part of that Martin Jones kind of deal.
I think he was. I think that's what he was. So if I didn't go with him, and I shouldn't have put him on the list, Morgan Geekie last year. 2 years, $4 million over those years. What he can give you, his ability to slot all over the lineup. You guys heard on last week's Poke the Bear. Connor put him on the second line. I had him on my third line. Like, that's a versatile guy. That you'll take that anytime for $2 million. So I'd probably go with Morgan Geekie as my fourth pick. And then just interesting other picks that I loved going back and looking through these. Chris Wagner. 2 years, 2.5 mil over both years. Like that worked out. He had a great, a couple seasons down there on that fourth line. Didn't really end great. But right after that signing, it panned out. Tomasz Nosek, that was a good signing. Again, good role player on that fourth line.
JVR, 1 year, 1 million. I know he kind of ran out of gas, but almost 40 points for a guy making 1 million. You will absolutely take that.
Yep. Wotherspoon for what he's become. Like, that's just an AHL player that, that would be like a Billy Sweezy this year, someone turning out to be a legit NHL everyday player. So I'd put Wotherspoon in there as well.
I do think Max Jones is a guy that could have the potential of being a guy that signed for 2 years, 1 million each. I think he's a guy that I think he described his game as he likes to play with his hair on fire, which is not safe. I wouldn't recommend it. But I feel like he's a guy that, if he's in a featured fourth line role, could be a pretty popular player for Bruins fans in terms of just how physical he is and how much he, I think, relishes playing that style of game. So I think he's a guy that could be joining that long list of the Wagners, the Tim Schallers, the Riley Nashes, these kind of guys that are put in a featured role in maybe a bottom six spot with the Bruins and kind of thrive playing to that identity.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I almost added him to our list and I was like, I don't know. I don't know if we're actually going to pick him, but you're right. I think he has the potential to be one of those guys. I don't think we missed anybody. I mean, Tim Schaller was a good signing.
The Granite Man.
That's right. That's right. Anybody else? I think we've hit everybody. Because again, this is just Sweeney's tenure. This is not like Savard and Chara and any of those guys. This is current times. I'm not ready to put Zadorov in there. I don't think that's a sure thing or anything like that. But interesting signings. It goes to show the Bruins have predominantly signed guys that can bolster their bottom six, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's how free agency should be played. Except when, this year they needed a number one center. They went out and got the main number one center on the market. So I'm okay with that too. We will have more of these. We're going to have best Don Sweeney draft picks of his tenure. We're going to have worst.
We will have worst. I feel like we're going to have comments being like, where the hell are the worst? Don't worry, guys.
Yeah,
we'll hit the negativity. We know Bruins fans. We'll dive into the negativity. Don't worry.
Exactly. It can't be all one episode. We're going to spread them out. So there will be a worst of episode. People are going to be like, yes, mention the 2015 draft. Mention Matt Bolesky. Trust me, those guys will be mentioned. And then we'll have some other fun evergreen content that it's previewing the upcoming season. But that's been this week's Bruins Beat. Connor, you are on your honeymoon, so go back, enjoy whatever you are doing. Go have fun. Go out to the ocean or go on your safari. You're going on a bunch of safaris, right? That's where you are right now.
Yes, I'm just at Animal Kingdom in Disney. That's where I am. I just want to keep it under wraps. So.
You're at York's Wild Animal Kingdom up in Maine, where they have two tigers and
great spot, especially when they get little Dippin' Dots out front. Woo.
I'm telling you, I don't know if I've said this on air before. Maybe I have, but I firmly believe. Maybe I have said this. People can remind me because you and I will talk off camera, so I forget if it's what I said on here or not. But I could raise tigers. I firmly believe I could raise tigers. Maybe I couldn't befriend, a tiger that's middle-aged because it's, doesn't know me. It'll kill me.
Doesn't know you. Yeah. You're just making Seinfeld references to it. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Get away from me.
Okay. Tell this guy to shut up. But a young tiger, raise him, walking around my house and then have him in the backyard, feed him. I could do it. I even know how to communicate. I can chuff. I can communicate with them too. So
That's
I
good.
mean, I think tigers I could be great with.
Okay.
So.
This is the new. This is Evan Exotic.
Yeah, I'm the next Joe Exotic. That's exactly what I am. And what was his rival's name again? What was her name?
It shows you how long ago the pandemic was that I can't remember her name, but
That's that at that time was probably like that's the biggest documentary has ever been. Everybody watched that documentary. We talked about that on like full Bruins Beats.
Objectively, like wasn't even like that. It was like entertainment. No. It wasn't like The Last Dance. I think was better for like a pandemic era watch. But it's Carol Baskins. Carol Baskins.
Oh my god! At that time, it was the biggest thing. I mean, if you were that crew putting that out, that was the perfect time to do it. That was like March 2020. Everybody's home. No one knows what to do. Let's watch the Tiger documentary. And the memes from that, I will never financially recover from this. Yes. Oh, outstanding. I have not. Didn't they put out like a second part to the documentary? I never watched.
I'm sure no one cared. It was post COVID, so no one cared.
No one cared. Well, it shows. I mean, like the Hawktua girl's going like super viral right now. In 2 weeks, no one will remember her. Nobody will care. It's also not that funny. I got to be honest. Yep. Like I hate to pour water on it, but just not that funny.
Yep.
But yeah, all the people love it right now. Anyways, people are like, hey, at least they're saving the non-Bruins talk for the end of the show. So
exactly. People are already switched to something else now. They're back to putting on REM on their radio.
That's right. They're back to it.
I don't know why I assume Bruins fans just blast REM, but it just feels like it's permanent listen to Everybody Hurts. That's all they listen to.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have to do a show at some point, maybe in August when you get back. Of like, if you guys have questions for us about like the pop culture or something that isn't Bruins related, we'll do a show on that. You can ask us anything, and we'll answer freely. Anyways, that's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. We're presented by Prize Picks and Game Time. You Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.